Am I here? Is this the one? That's that's some fucking technical troubles right off the bat, man. Hi. Are you? I'm gonna check to see if we're here. Okay. So just bear with me if you're joining. I doubt I have anybody looking right now, but let's go to YouTube. Oh, I do. I see me. Okay, great. I'm streaming live. Now what we're gonna do is let's go ahead and let's share this. Let's put it on Facebook to begin with. Okay, hey guys. Hey guys. I'm live right now. If you want to jump in and say hello. All right, so we're gonna put that on. We're gonna put that on Facebook right now. Okay, so we put that on Facebook, right? All right. See if that posted. That post. Let's see if we'll get going in a minute, guys. Give me a second. Okay, so we're gonna do one more. We're gonna do it again. Okay, we're gonna say, just bear with me. We're just friends, man. Just fucking friends. So let's share this to. What about to? I kind of want to put it on Threads. Huh? Instagram, Threads. Okay, Threads. Hey guys. Hey, I'm live. Hey, I'm live. Hey, find me. Streaming live this morning. Jump in and say hello. Post. Keep threads open to finish posting. We're going to get started, I promise. Okay, I put it on both. All right. What up? It's been a minute. You have something that you like want to do and that like you set up to do and you're kind of like prepared to do it and all that bullshit, right? And like it's something you really want to do, but you just can't seem to do it. That's me right now with live streaming and like making YouTube content. It's so much fucking work. You know, any of you that have never done it and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, these people just get on the internet and run their mouth and make so much money. Do it. Try and do it. See the amount of time it puts into like to just figure out content, the technology. Because most people up on doing this, they don't have a team behind them. I don't. I'm just like an old ass man trying to do this thing. I got some shit I want to say. Right? I got some stuff I want to say. And I mean, I could go back to being one of the guys that just standing on the street corner with a fucking sign. You know, like honk if you want to end the Gulf War. I mean, I'm still down to do that. If anybody wants to do that, get at me. But it's a lot of work, man. Editing, posting, content strikes. That's a whole fucking thing, dude. You're like, what did I get a strike for? And then you got all the different social media platforms that need things a different way. It's a lot. And I'm basically by nature pretty fucking lazy, so I don't want to do it. But I want to do it. So we're going to try and get back to getting on a pretty semi-regular, posting schedule here and see how it goes. Today, I want to take a look at something that is called Copaganda. Copaganda. What the hell is Copaganda, Hammy? Well, I'm gonna switch this over here and kind of you can read this. What happened to my mouse? Okay, read this wiki page with me. Okay, so Copaganda is propaganda efforts to shape public opinion about police or counter criticism of police and anti-police sentiment. The term is mostly used in the United States though also in other countries such as the United Kingdom, the Philippines, and Canada to criticize news media, creating one-sided depictions of police, critically repeating police narratives, or minimalizing police misconduct. It has also been applied to human interest stories and viral videos of cops performing wholesale activities in their communities. Fictional depictions of police, especially in police procedurals and legal dramas, have been criticized for portraying police as infallible heroes and reinforcing misconceptions about crime rates, minority groups, and police misconduct. Okay. Hammy, it's a fucking Sunday morning, dude. What are you doing to us? Look, first off, don't watch if you don't want to watch. This is when I can make the live broadcast, and frankly, I'm going to cut this up into smaller pieces and post it all over the net, and you can watch it whenever you want. But like, these are things that are important to me, and honestly, they should be important to you, but it seems that they're not to too many people. Anna Sprung. Hello, hi, how are you? Thanks for joining me. You're like my one commenter so far. Thank you on my little lowly little channel. So I'm not going to pretend to be like, I'm not a great essayist, and I don't know that I speak very eloquently on any topic, except maybe myself and my own struggles, right? But I do have thoughts and beliefs, and there are people that are just much better at expressing those things than I am. So that's why I probably do more reaction content, because there's things that I'm interested in that I want to share with you. But like, man, I'm not capable of making my own content around that, and I freely admit that. And I think that that's okay. Not all of us. Not all of us are Mr. Beast, man. Thank you for liking my beard. I like it too. Not all of us are Mr. Beast. Let's think of somebody who's somebody that's like a lightning rod, Well, this guy's kind of a lightning rod. Today we're going to be hearing from, and he does great video essays, FD Signifier. Now, he's a YouTuber that, and sometimes can be a little controversial. He falls from what we'll call the black leftist part of TikTok. And I really like his content. Now, not all of his content, but I mean, who can I say that about in general? And I know there's a fair amount of controversy regarding him in leftist TikTok or leftist YouTube, Reddit. I mean, there's a bunch of shit on Reddit about him, but like, I don't know what's true or what's not true. And none of the controversy that I saw was like, it was more about opinions. It wasn't about like any behaviors that he exhibited that like I wouldn't be able to, like if he had behaviors that I just couldn't get behind, man, that I saw, like I would not be, we would not be reacting to one of his videos, but that maybe his behaviors aren't, I don't know, maybe for you it's too much. For me, it's worth listening to him, And again, what I think one of the things, well, we'll get into it a little bit later. Why don't we just kind of like jump into this video? And he has I got it here up on YouTube. Hang on. So he's got bear with me, my little beautifuls. He's got a video that I've been watching here on YouTube, and it's called "The Police Won't Save Us." Okay, and I really liked it. We're not going to watch all of it. We're going to watch a couple of parts of it, and we're going to do some reaction to it, and we'll just kind of go from there. So you guys tell me what you think. Hopefully you want to jump in, or if you want to jump in the comments later, I totally appreciate it. So let's go and get started.
On a relationship between the police and black people, or hell, all the people, really being more effectively communicated. I mean, it's a reason you never heard a single rapper yelling, "All cops are bastards." Pretty sure most black people don't even know what ACAB is unless a liberal come and explains it.
He has time now to think about what he's done. And I believe he'll turn out all right.
So before getting into the heavier explicit details about these things and the core arguments and the research and the haymakers about police and the courts, etc., first we got to hold up a mirror. Because I have one overall goal, which is for everyone that watches this video to become a supporter of ending policing as we know it and abolishing all prisons, but to really...
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm in support of those things, and that's what's going to hook me into it, right? I definitely am in support of those things. I don't know how to go about it. I'm not educated enough to tell you how to do it or all the million reasons or debate with you why we should or shouldn't do it. But I look out into the world and see into our country and see how we're living and what it's creating. And I don't like it. I don't like it enough to where I don't want to do it. And I don't like the way that we do it. I know that. So I'm here to hear more educated voices than mine. And hopefully find a plan that I like the most and go from there. So let's follow what he has to say.
Do that, the first thing we have to recognize is that the biggest asset the police and these systems have is our consent and faith in them as institutions. Even folks that know firsthand how trash these systems are will think that it's going too far to say we're going to abolish prisons. The idea of having no justice system, no law and order, that's ridiculous and even dangerous. We need the police to protect and serve, and we need prisons to put away dangerous people so that they can't hurt anyone.
Abolishing the NYPD, that'd be suicide.
But yes, they're needed. I push for them to be here.
There's too many criminals out here, man. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't feel safe.
So we need control of the city. So I think the police are necessary.
We'll get to most of that bullshit a little later.
So, dude, I get that though, man. The world's a scary fucking place, bro. I get it. I get that we feel like we need police. Keep in mind that for most of us alive, this is the only way things have been done. We don't know it any different way. This is the only way things have been done, right? And if you look like me, your experiences with the police are probably, I promise you, my experiences with the police are not the same as his, like just by nature of my experiences. So I really should listen to his experiences because they're different than mine if I'm going to form an opinion. But anyways, and you know what? I appreciate you saying you're not very political, but this is interesting for you. Yeah, because you know what? I don't know if this is political. I know it goes into the realm of politics, but I'm not sure if it's like a political topic, you know? Like this policing and prisons affect everybody on all sides of all spectrums of life, but they definitely have deleterious effects more on poor people and or people of color, especially black men in this country. And those are facts. And like, you know what? Those people are my brothers and you're my sister. And like, I care about people. I care about you. I care about the human experience. So anyways, enough for preaching for me.
I'm not saying that we won't ever need a form of community level security or that crime will never happen in a world with no police or that we won't have to figure out what to do about said crime and more importantly, victims of crime. Nobody who is serious about abolition believes these things. But I do want to challenge why we fear this mythical, lawless reality so much in the first place, and why we think the police in our current court system is responsible for the level of safety or justice we currently have. I want you watching this right now to consider just how much actual experience you have with the police and the criminal justice system. Because of the way the algorithm works and what I know about my audience, the chances are if you're watching this video on YouTube, you're watching as a person of relative privilege, probably a relatively decent level of education, which means you probably have not had much engagement with the criminal justice system at any level.
This is true for me. Okay. Now I've had some engagement. Okay. And I have some experiences, and honestly, I haven't enjoyed the experiences. And some engagement I've had has just been on a personal level with people in law enforcement and people in the prison systems. And I don't have a high opinion. I'll just tell you that right now. But my experience, like I said, is different. And I fall into the category of what he said with regards to his audience. Like this is made for me. I really like, one of the things I like about his content is the way, so he was an educator before he became a YouTuber. And so he has a way of making these topics very accessible to someone like me who isn't as well educated as he is and can't articulate these experiences the way that he can. He makes it accessible to me. So if I stay humble and have an open mind around it, like he's teaching, because he's a fucking teacher. So anyways, that's something that's important to me, right? His background is of teaching, and I look at it as a lesson.
If you're black, there's a higher likelihood you've been profiled by police before, pulled over, maybe even detained. But have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been convicted? Do you have people in your family or close to you that have done time? Have you seen the long-term effects of prison on those individuals when they finally come home? Have you ever been victim of a crime and realized how difficult it is to actually get justice? Ever experienced the overall indifference of the police to your well-being after you've called them to come protect and serve?
A number of victims who report sexual assault are treated insensitively, are not believed, are blamed for their assaults, and are traumatized by their experience with police.
I started to feel like a victim. Because of my interactions with the police. They didn't believe me. They made me feel ashamed for questioning them. They made me feel like I was making something up.
Have you ever been systematized or even been in court custody or had a child in defects? I ask these questions because if you're watching this, it's highly likely you have little to no experience with these things.
He's now aging out of Georgia's foster care. Christian considers it a legal system that failed him. But the chaos from moving to foster home to one day this year, somewhere truly unexpected. This Department of Family and Children's Services office is where he was living.
It didn't make sense to me why this was happening to me. When I came in, I saw a lot of blankets on the floor, a lot of things on the floor. There was not a lot of food in there.
DFACS, the agency tasked with protecting kids, housed foster youth in its county offices for months on end.
We're staying here because they don't have nowhere for us to go.
The majority of us who lend power to the system don't really know what this system feels like in real life.
I think when we are passively consuming escapist content over and over again, it tends to become our main contact point, especially for like white people or people who don't have a lot of interaction with the police. The main way you interact with the police is through these cop shows. That is their main contact point. So like they think about the police, they think about crime, and they're like, well, I saw this on Law and Order once. And you know, that might not be realistic, but that's like what I got.
Going back to my sons, they're lucky enough that their main engagement with the police are from security officers in their schools. And they're all black men with smiling faces and gentle, strong demeanors. And I wave hi and talk to them every day as I drop my boys off. And that's the natural cognitive dissonance that you might have toward individual police officers and the society.
You know, Anna, you say that, and I think it's really common for us to say all systems are broken, right? Because it feels broken. I totally get that. Like, it feels broken that the system is broken. But you know what? I don't think the system is broken. I think this is actually the way it was intended to work. I'm talking about policing and the courts and business and capitalism and healthcare. I think that this is the way it was intended to work, to put us in the position that we're in now. And that's the only thing that logically makes sense to me. Because how could everything be so broken? That broken implies that it had some good intent at some point, and it just sort of got away from us. You mean everything did? I used to think that, but I just can't buy it anymore. But I used to think exactly like that because I'm trying to put my head around why. Because I want to control it, right? I don't want it to be this way. I want to control it, you know. I can't see what this says. The agency is meant to. My chat's a little bit weird. Anyways, I'm going to go back to video, but I just wanted to jump on that point because, like, I get understanding that it comes from a place of fucking frustration, right? I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated as hell. So let's go back to what my man's is saying.
Societal role that they inhabit. And I'm not saying that cognitive dissonance needs to go away and that you have to see all police officers as demons. And most people don't feel that way. But most people also don't have to engage with the full reality of the system. And they think that police only exist in this positive, helpful space that we are lucky to experience depending on the background and privilege that you have right now. When people get money, much like in Ice Cube, they tend to have a very different perspective on how the police treat people. Ice Cube started out as fuck the police, and now he's doing interviews with Tucker Carlson talking about bootstrap politics because Ice Cube is now a very rich man. And the person he was when he made that song is a very different person than who he is now.
If you are a person who is not regularly interacting with crime or poverty, then every time you see a dark street, a dark alley or something, you're seeing it on TV.
We got a 1031 on foot. Westbound on Baden.
And that means something awful is probably happening in that alley, which means that even if most alleys are fine, every time you see one, you are scared of it because the only thing you've ever seen happen in them is like murder. You tend to like fear things like that. I've recognized this with like my extended family. Like they're scared of cities because that's where the crime is. Because that's the only time that they ever see cities is on TV and these cop shows.
When we talk about prison abolition, we talk about trying to actually address the problems that are really inside our community. You know, we started to think about transformative justice and how to deal with conflicts and harm that is done within the community, because a lot of people think of crimes, they're thinking of harm, right? Because most crimes, let's be real, aren't really about harm. Like, for example, a lot of people are arrested for drug crimes, which isn't about like you harming someone. Nobody's going out to harm somebody when they're using drugs. Nobody's going out to harm somebody even when they're selling drugs. Now, you could argue that people using drugs are harming themselves and then selling people is whatever, like adds to that. But that also, I would argue, generally, people are using drugs because of the trauma that they have faced in their community that already is existing from all the way back to slavery, and it's just passing down this trauma over and over again, and getting reinforced by the system itself.
I think the first thing that people need to understand about abolition, and I always put it this way, is that abolition is a vision for the future. You know, it is abolitionists are aware. We are aware of the fact that they're not going to just, open up all the prisons and close the courts and get rid of all the police tomorrow or today. And we recognize that we also don't have the infrastructures in place to do that, right? The idea is that investing in criminalization of people and putting more money and resources into under-resourced communities and people so that you could police them and incarcerate them and saddle them with debts and criminal records and all of these things don't actually address crime. This isn't just about, that I just care about the criminals, which is a whole nother conversation, but it's about caring about yourself and trying to stop crime and recognizing that, well, a system that has created a profit system on incarcerating people it literally is in the business of regurgitating and repeating that because that's what keeps the system running.
This is what I mean about voices that can articulate these things better than I can, right? I have to be watching and learning from people like these two here, because I feel that way, okay? I feel what she's saying, and I have for a very long time, but I don't know how to express it in conversation when I talk to other people, especially that look like me, that have different beliefs. Because when I say something like, abolish the police, I know what I feel, but I don't know how to express it. And so I'm just some ignorant, basically uneducated person trying to express a really important point that I feel strongly about. And Anna, I lost your chat. I lost the chat for a minute. I don't know what the fuck I did. I don't know what I did. But I started clicking buttons, but I got it back. So now I see you again. So hi, I'm glad you're still here. If you're still here.
When you say abolish prisons, the question that people will usually bring to you is, what about the rapists and murderers? What about the abusers and the sexual predators and all the people that we tend to think police and jails protect us from? Again, ask yourself how much you know about these situations. Most sexual assaults are never even prosecuted, and most murders are never solved by a wide margin. Worse yet, many sexual assaults that result in arrest never go to trial. I'm sure many of us remember Brock Turner from a few years ago. That situation where this person was convicted of rape and did not see any jail time is not as rare as you think. According to one study, less than 60% of convicted sex offenders ever spend time in a prison. One study in Idaho tracking Pedialyte drinkers found that only 28% of those convicted of child sexual assault actually went to jail. We are already living in the world.
We know this, right? We know that because so many of us have our own personal experience with that, right? That's kind of partly what the Me Too movement was about and why it expanded. And I know it got co-opted and people have big feelings about that, but like, we know this. You know it in your heart. But we don't necessarily, we get so frustrated, we don't know what to do about it. And so we allow these draconian things to happen in our society that really, they hurt a lot of people, including ourselves.
That people are telling us to fear without the police. So why are we, so invested in this myth that it does work? Why is it so important for us to see those who really suffer under the system as deserving of that suffering if it means that this myth can be maintained? There's a lot of answers as to why that's the case. I could fill up 5 more videos, but for the sake of time, we're going to focus on one major factor, which is how we view crime and criminals in this country, and conversely, how we view the police, and how these views make the horrors of this system seem justified, maybe even normal. So let's go back in time. Coming out of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s and the Supreme Court era of the 70s, relatively significant actions were taken to address racism in the United States. However, these actions were almost always met with overt resentment and resistance from white Americans.
It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom. And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
And the result from the 1970s going forward was nearly 40 years of Republican-dominated governments in America, often elected using Southern strategies popularized by Richard Nixon and Barry Goldwater. The Southern strategy, for those who do not know, was basically using the fear of black anything to rile up voters and get them to vote and empower Democrats who would eventually become modern-day Republicans.
Bush and Dukakis on...
Okay, what you're about to watch isn't just history for me. Like I lived this. I remember this. I'm gonna be 57 next week on Tuesday, so I'm old as fuck. I remember this stuff, and I remember it affected me in all kinds of uncomfortable ways. Okay, like it affected me, and I had this stuff shoved down my throat from the earliest of ages. And so this is the stuff that propagandized me. These are my experiences now. So if you're interested, like pay attention to this, because like this is real. It's not like something that happened far away.
Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
People often think the culture wars that we're dealing with online all the time today are new, but they're really not. There's always been racial and gender divides that have always bled into or often stemmed from political divides. And they almost always are between a dominant group fighting to keep a subordinate group from making progress. It's often seen as deserving versus undeserving, but what it really is meant to be is white versus black, or rich versus poor. That said, in this time period, it wasn't hard to entrench a negative public sentiment toward inner city urban areas as Americans witnessed urban decay that had never been seen before, a result of generations of disinvestment and economic and social exploitation of black and brown people in places like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Baltimore, etc. And this image of black and brown people tearing each other apart in the inner cities was the status quo of the time for that entire time. But a change of sorts came in the early 90s when Bill Clinton became the first Democratic president in 12 years and one of only 2 Democrats to be the president in almost a 40-year period. And this happened because Clinton led a rightward shift in Democratic policies, promising to address crime and cult welfare. And with some help from third-party spoiler Ross Perot, Clinton beat incumbent George Bush Sr. to become president in 1992.
Congratulations.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Anna asked a really good question because she doesn't really follow politics too much, and that's fine. I get it. So she said, asked the question, Republican is conservative, right? Question mark. And so it's a legitimate question. So I'm going to answer it from my perspective. Being a Republican does not mean you're conservative. In my opinion, you are. But there are Democrats that are conservative. So basically, all Republicans, oh, you're Canadian, great. All Republicans are conservative in American politics. They fall to the right side of the political spectrum. Now they go from ultra conservative, like which would be your like white nationalists, all the way down to what we call a moderate. Republicans take a lot of pride in their conservatism, and they incorporate that into their politics, or typically their religious and spiritual beliefs are incorporated into their politics. Now, I am on the opposite end of the spectrum politically. I'm a leftist. I believe that there is not Republican, conservative, Democrat, liberal. I believe liberals, everything to the right of me. So Democrats are coined as liberals, but in reality, I believe most liberals are Republicans in sheep's clothing that don't like to admit it. They don't want to admit it. So they may not have some of the spiritual beliefs around politics, but they're still shills for large corporations, defense contractors, special interests, and lobbyists. And you can see that right now in the American political spectrum. So they give lip service to wanting to provide things like healthcare and education, and maybe gun reform to the masses because the words are popular, but in reality, they do fucking nothing about it. Okay? Because of the money that they receive. And this guy's like one of them, right? Bill Clinton was demonized for many things, but seen as this big giant liberal, and in reality, in today's politics, he could easily be a Republican, a conservative. And that's why he was elected, because his policies, especially around banking and crime, which we'll learn about, were pretty fucking far to the right, man. And they hurt a lot of people. And that's the truth. And we have the benefit of looking back on history and seeing it now. So, all right, let's go back to someone more educated than me.
2 years later, Clinton would make good on his promise to address crime, which culminated in the 1994 crime bill, guided by his wife and future senator/presidential candidate Hillary Clinton and current president and former vice president Joe Biden.
It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street.
The crime bill has been talked about a ton in the last decade or so.
See what I'm saying?
Disastrous results of it have now really become impossible not to notice. Policymakers at that time leaned into tough on crime ideology as opposed to the more obvious and also well-known research around social and community development to address crime. The bill made little to no investment into the poor by design urban centers of America that I spoke about earlier. Instead of investment in those cities, millions were spent on funding the police, expanding federal prisons, and fighting the war on drugs. Policies were instituted for mandatory minimum sentences, 3-strike rules, and countless other new reasons to put predominantly poor people and disproportionately black people in prison. One of the most notable elements being the violent offender incarceration and Truth in Sentencing Incentive Grant Program, which gave out $12.5 billion in grant money, not for education, healthcare, housing, or community investment, but for building prisons to house all the newly incarcerated. And it worked in a multitude of ways. It's fair to say that the crime bill reduced crime, although it's also fair to say that crime was reducing beforehand.
And the thing that is always striking to me, and I think really underplayed in our national discourse over crime, is that we don't really understand it. If you go into the 80s and the 90s, you see crime goes way, way up in the 70s, way, way up in all kinds of different jurisdictions, more or less all at the same time. And then it begins going way, way down in all kinds of different places all at the same time. So you have stories that people know, like there's New York with Rudy Giuliani and broken windows policing and stop and frisk. But it also goes down in all these places that didn't do what New York City did. It's so widespread, both the rise and the fall, that you end up having researchers trying to think of even broader explanations, like whether or not lead and the amount of lead in young kids' bloodstream and thus the effect on their executive function when they got older, maybe that's the causal mechanism.
And it's definitely more fair to say that the bill greatly increased mass incarceration, which had also been spiking since the Reagan era. Now, since the 2010s, statistically, incarceration has been lessening as people realizing the problems of this bill have started to make changes to undermine its damages. But understand, the damage had already been done. I bring all of this up because we often look at the failure of this bill as something that happened to the black community from white political forces. And while this is overall true, it's not a useful or fair critique of what actually happened. A more accurate critique requires us to engage with the fact that a lot of black people, many who...
This is interesting now, okay? Like, I needed to be reminded of this because I get hung up on like how we got here, and I understand who's like really behind everything, but this, I forget this stuff. So I just appreciate being reminded because it's important. It's so important to be honest about it, to really be honest about it, to see what's going on, how we got here. If we really want to change things, you have to be humble and look at all the places where there's the dirt if you want to truly have the house be clean.
Were directly suffering under an epidemic of crime and drugs were on board with this bill from day one.
Let me start out with this. I am ashamed of my vote. I sincerely apologize to my God, apologize to my community, to my family. That was the worst vote, as I look back over the years, that I've taken since I've been in the Congress.
And that brings me back to the question of the first section. Why were black people so willing to see carceral punishment as a fix to societal problems of crime? The 1994 crime bill was endorsed by the Congressional Black Caucus, and it was supported by black Democratic leaders like the only black senator at the time, Carol Moseley Braun.
I could cite statistics such as these regarding the level of violent crime in our society for the rest of this evening, but the numbers only serve to illustrate what we already know. I believe that the federal government must act to help take back our streets, to ensure that every man, woman, and child in this country feels safe in their communities, in their schools, and in their homes. And that is why it is imperative that Congress send this bill to the president as soon.
Or the current so-called kingmaker, Jim Clyburn.
But people say that, it at least perpetuated the idea that more people should be imprisoned. Do you ever think about that your support for this bill may have perpetuated mass incarceration as we see it now?
Yeah, I think about that. I just don't think that's true.
And this is not to say that other black Democrats like the late great John Lewis or Maxine Waters didn't oppose the bill as a whole.
We know the best way of effectively reducing crime lies in addressing the root causes of crime. Unfortunately, there is no issue we face where the difference between responsible governing and political popularity is so great. In the politics of crime, the right thing and the politically popular thing are total opposites. The best politics of crime involves the emotional appeal, mandatory minimum sentences, life without parole, no rehabilitation, more death penalty provisions, and put them to death quicker by cutting out the appeals. That strategy appeals to emotion and helps politicians get elected, but it does nothing to reduce crime in the streets.
But they were still...
That's the thing. It appeals to emotion. There's nothing more emotional than crime. It's so traumatizing when these things happen to you. And the fear that people live with around being victimized is it's palpable in some people. That's almost all they talk about, right? We have it going on right now with the problems at the border. That's the fear. Powers that be have been guiding us and driving us with fear since the beginning. And it works, man. Fucking works. Because at the heart of things, at the base of things, we're all just a bunch of scared little kids. I know I still am. I'm still a fucking scared little kid. So I can be absolutely motivated and moved by fear. And at some point, I don't want it to... you take care, Anna. I appreciate you. I really do. I know it's a lot. I thank you for being here. I appreciate and love you. Fear drives us. It drives most of us. And if you say it doesn't, I implore you to look back inside and really look at your life. All right? Just really look at the decisions you've made and what was behind it. That is super easy for people to manipulate. Okay? It's super for people to manipulate and get you to change the way you think. And honestly, vote outside of your own real best interests. Because at your heart, you're scared and you won't admit it to anyone.
Responding to pressure from regular black people in the crosshairs of this problems to do something, anything about the crime in these communities. There were plenty of black people asking for community investment and deterrence programs and fighting against three-strike rules and mandatory minimums. But overall, a lot of black folks seem to think that the police would easily be able to tell the good black folks from the bad, and that the deserving would benefit and that the undeserving would suffer.
On the question of additional police officers, if we hired the right police officers and if they did the right thing, would that have an impact on the crime rate?
I doubt it. As I said before, even if you hire the right police officers and they're doing the right thing all the time, what are you going to do with them? They're going to be walking all over top of each other. In this country, I think we're down. Those numbers are even greater. When there was a time 20 years ago when my department had 8,500 police officers, we're now down to 6,200 police officers. The crime rate was higher then than it is now. And those bear the national statistics. So it's not the number of police officers that you have, it's the job that they perform.
Who remembers a few years ago the awful social media trend of black parents embarrassing their children on Facebook by cutting their hair in ridiculous ways and sending them to school and videotaping the whole thing, or showing up to the school to berate and beat them in front of the world? Who has joked about experiences getting whipped by parents and grandparents? I think it's impossible to deny that the concept of carcerality is low-key a little deep in Black culture. And it may start out as, older Black folks telling kids to pull their pants up, but it lends itself to a multitude of Black people endorsing a corrupt prison system, maybe to prove that they are one of the good ones. I worked with parents and troubled youth a lot over the course of my pre-YouTube career. And one thing that you'll always hear from a parent whose kid is in trouble is how they did everything they were supposed to do to keep their child out of trouble. In fact, they sometimes overpresent these ideas, the fact that they were whipping their child and taking away their child's stuff and embarrassing their child. And you kind of want to tell them, maybe not in the moment, that that's probably part of the problem.
So, okay, if you look like me, all right? If you look like me, this is an area where I need to just be quiet. This is a learning time for someone who looks like me. Now, I have experiences around some of the things they're talking about. And my experiences are, I was parented a certain way, and I have my experiences around that. Now, they're extremely different than these two people's experiences, and I cannot relate in any way what it was like to grow up in a household full of people that look like them. And I shouldn't pretend that I do. So this is a time when I listen and learn so I can try to come to a place of understanding their experience, because all I am is another person on this planet trying to coexist as loving and compassionately as I can with everyone.
You're gonna lose your child's trust, possibly for life. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when I woke up with police surrounding my bed, bro. Like that, My grandma did a lot of effed up stuff after that too, so it just got worse. But like, that had like shattered trust from that point. And then I think not far after when I started standing up and not letting her beat me anymore. I was like, no, you ain't gonna beat me anymore. I'm good. Like, because even though she beat me my whole life, I still had trust and faith in her till that moment.
Very oftentimes when my clients talk to me, I always try to tell people when I meet my client, this is not the first system to fail them. You know what I mean? By virtue of me as a public defender representing them, which is who the majority is represented by in the criminal system, you are literally impoverished. You're disenfranchised in some way. You've already experienced some kind of institutional letdown. And I've never been that. I've never walked through this. Like, all of those things are a culmination of how you end up to be, how you end up in your choices, how all those things, like, imagine in your teenage years, I am about to be 30 next month. The things, the anxieties, the depressions, whatever issues that I had as a teenage are the things that have grown, manifested, worked through, whatever, in all this time. So imagine your teen years, your first brush with depression, someone dies, and that somehow becomes your mother criminalizes you. Where does that trickle? Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so by the time you do something that you commit some crime that people won't consider a crime of poverty or whatever, because they don't think of the chain. They don't think of the entire chain and how all these things.
And that's the point of this whole section, is to dig through the tough reality that while we suffer under the systems, we are still very deeply invested in them, down to how we raise our children. And I want to blame it on the legacy of our treatment during and post-slavery. I want to blame it on internalized anti-Blackness. I'm sure there's several good books that explain exactly how this stems out from that behavior for whatever reason. But if we are going to be serious about addressing the problem, we have to be serious about divesting from it. We have to stand against the system and the belief that putting people, especially our people, in prisons when they get in trouble and police custody will help us long term or even in the short term. Now, this isn't easy because we don't live in a society where police in prisons aren't necessary. I won't tell you to never call the police or never use the system to seek justice or restitution when you have to, but I ask you to consider when and how you can avoid involving these systems, and under what circumstances does the involvement in this system really have a chance to even be meaningful? Because in most cases, they don't. So you need to be mindful of how these systems really work versus how they pretend to work.
That's why
That's fucking reasonable. That's super reasonable to me. Right? I mean, is that not reasonable to you? Makes total sense. He's gonna move into the second part of the video, which is the one that I wasn't even gonna react to this first section that we just totally did, but this is the next section, and it's a little shorter, and so I think we're gonna go. We'll probably go about an hour and a half today in totality. But the second part, I'm looking forward to watching with you guys and see when getting some thoughts on it. Okay.
Confuses me why we ever needed anything else to describe the problem or the solution. Like, I know FD and them be using all them big words and getting extra deep in these topics and whatnot, but sometimes the shit ain't that deep. Sometimes it's real simple. You start contextualizing and debating, and next thing you know, you lost the whole plot of what we talking about. Not only have you taken the claws out and dulled the teeth of a lion, you've replaced the lion with a house cat that makes everyone comfortable. That's why for me it's always been real simple. Fuck the police. We don't need to clean it up. We don't need to change it. We don't need to switch it up so that it's a little more palatable. And I guarantee they're not going to say that if they don't mean it.
Just take it easy. Hey, you stumbled onto something here. Maybe we can all benefit from this slight misunderstanding. Now let's go someplace quiet so we can talk this over.
Fucking Rowdy Piper, man. That was a good way to get me hooked in. You grabbed the deep down white boy in me. I gotta be honest. You grabbed the deep down white boy in me when you did this.
So you bastards die just like we did.
The first myth that needs to be dispelled is what the police, and by extension our criminal justice system, is actually here for. The motto, protect and serve, is ubiquitously known as a police creed, but it's not real. Or moreover, it's not written in any police bylaws that they must protect and serve you, the everyday normal citizen. I could cherry pick countless examples of police literally not protecting and serving people when they most need them. I could talk about the police in the Uvalde shooting from a couple of years ago, where they stood idly while a spree shooter murdered 19 children and 2 teachers. Or I could talk about the famous case in New York where police stood behind a door watching a man being attacked with a knife and waited until he and another private citizen subdued the attacker before intervening. Or the landmark child abuse case in 1989, which led to a Supreme Court ruling that says that the police do not have to protect you from harm. A ruling that was upheld again in 2005 after a child murder case.
If you look like me, don't run from that shit. That shit happened and it affects you. It affects you. Don't run from that. Don't sit here and act like, well, that's not my community or those are outlier cases. No. A million outlier cases start showing you a problem, a systemic problem. And if you bury your freaking head in the sand around it, you're just hiding because you're afraid of what it means and turning your world upside down on what you've been told to think your entire life.
Feel free to look this up. Protect and serve isn't real. The police don't have to protect you from harm unless you're a rich land or property owner, probably. Protection of land and property is probably the true origin of policing as we know it. They were slave catchers protecting the property of slave owners in the South or private businesses in the North. But at least for a time, these entities were often privately funded by the rich who, ironically or unironically, often hired criminals and thugs and miscreants as their police to secure their property.
Isn't that what the Pinkertons were? Right? Like we've had these private detective agency police forces since before we had actual real municipal police departments. I believe that's what the Pinkertons were.
Not until 1838 when we get our first ever publicly funded police force in Boston as rich shipping business owners convinced the local municipality to take over the cost of their, at the time, private protection of their property as a public good. And suddenly, we have taxpayer-funded policing as we know it. However, for a long time, the sentiment of fuck the police was much more popular than you might think. For longer than not, in fact, the police were looked at by the general public as nuisances, losers, and snitches, or worse yet, themselves another gang of thugs who just happened to serve the economic or political elite.
I know the police cause you trouble. They cause trouble everywhere. But when you die and go to heaven, you'll find no policeman there.
After 60 plus years of publicly funded police and constant complaints from citizens, the Lexile Committee in New York did the first major probe of police activity in the United States. And after 10,000 pages of testimony from over 700 witnesses, the commission came to the following conclusions.
It appears, therefore, that the police formed a separate and highly privileged class, armed with the authority and the machinery for oppression and punishment, but practically freed themselves from the operation of the criminal law. Many of the members of the force, and even superior officers, have abused the resources of physical power which have been provided for them, and their use only in the cases of necessity in the making of arrests and the restraint of disorder, to gratify personal spite and brutal instincts, and to reduce their victims to a condition of servility. This condition has grown to such an extent that even in the eyes of our foreign-born residents, our institutions have been degraded, and those who have fled from oppression abroad have come here to be doubly oppressed in a professedly free and liberal country. The harm thus done by engendering bitterness and hatred in the minds of multitudes of those people who look upon the police as the highest expression of governmental power.
This sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? It's basic.
This isn't fucking new. That's like 120 years ago. That's how long this has been going on. Longer. It's not new. This is some new mindset. It's always been like this, guys. We're just not aware of it because we got our heads in the sand. We don't want it to be like this. So we got our fucking heads in the sand. I did. For years. Right? I did. I'm embarrassed to say I was kind of pro-cop for a long time. And then over time, my life experiences and just seeing the misjustice and the abuse year after year after year, I finally friggin' woke up. Why did it take me so long? Because I didn't have the experiences people like him have had. Or people that look like him. I didn't have those experiences. So why wouldn't it take me longer? But I can be honest about that. And then do something that healthy people do all the time, which is change their mind.
What most black people and pretty much every left-leaning person in earshot has been saying about the police for at least the last 10 years and really longer. So you might be wondering, how did we go from that to where we are now? Why are the police so beloved and trusted now? It's not like they've gotten any better. Why, when we constantly see the abject failure of police, do people look at those instances of failure as anomalies and not an indication of the reality of policing? The answer to this is multifaceted. There's an inherent investment in the authority that permeates American society. A lot of the support for police, especially now, is essentially just a tacit endorsement of racism and anti-blackness. That's why you have people yelling all lives matter to people saying Black Lives Matter, because you know exactly what they're trying to say. The thin blue line flag saw a huge surge in popularity when black people started marching against police brutality. I don't think that's a coincidence. But what I really want to engage in with most is a concept called Copaganda, which brings us to an old TV show called Dragnet.
All right, here we go. Stick with me through this part, man. Stick with me through this part, because this is what's up. This is really interesting to see, especially if you're an old fucker like me. Okay? Stick with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
If you look at like early 1900s films or like the 1910s, you run into stuff like the Keystone Cops, Charlie Chaplin. These are people, Buster Keaton, these are people who are not exactly liking the police. And that stuff's going on for a while. And then when they move to television, it's like one of the first big TV shows in the 50s, Jack Webb decides, I'm going to work with the police. I'm going to work with the LAPD. I'm going to give them something that is very, quote unquote, authentic.
The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Authenticity is the calling card of cop shows and of Copaganda, is this idea that this is the real story. These are real cases.
These are their stories.
web. He gets all of this equipment from the police. He gets to look at real case files. He gets to do all this stuff for free. So all of that becomes way cheaper and thus more profitable. And all he's got to do, all Jack Webb's got to do, is send every script to the LAPD for censorship and approval.
What? I didn't know that. They sent the scripts to the LAPD for censorship and approval. What the fuck? I had no idea that happened. Like, I'm as culpable as the next person watching these freaking... Dude, I'm such a hypocrite. Police dramas, true crime, fucking shows about the CIA, and I hate the fucking CIA. But I probably watch Homeland like 5 times. Like, I'm an absolute hypocrite, right? So when I say all cops are bastards, it includes all of them too, you know? Like, it's ingrained in my brain. I get it. And learning to separate the realities of these things and what's being shoved down my throat and in my brain. I don't know if I'm from television and fantasy and Copaganda. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do it. I don't know if I'm mentally capable of being able to do it. I don't even know if I have the willingness to do it. But like, I'm aware of it, man. And you should be aware of it too, really. Especially when it's like broken out to you at this level of what was actually going on and what is going on around it. I know I'm late to the party on this. I'm late to most parties, but like, I'm here.
For Dragnet, the depiction of police in the media mostly aligned with what the Luxau report had to say. Charlie Chaplin, the Keystone Cops, even Bugs Bunny cartoons showed a negative public sentiment toward the police. Dragnet changed that. Dragnet began a legacy of propaganda where people's understanding of policing stopped being what was actually happening in the streets and started being what we see on TV right now. And since most people don't regularly interact with the police, as we said earlier, and when they do, it's often a mostly positive experience, the reality of what police are to those who interact with them the most, aka the poor, is pretty much not understood. And for over half a century, we've been inundated with propaganda, from the cop shows of the 60s and 70s to the action cops of the 80s and 90s to the procedural dramas of the 2000s and beyond. And now even the neo-propaganda of Marvel and Disney, where the heroes are still cops, but they also have superpowers and they make funny jokes.
Hello, girl, kick your ass.
Cop shows contribute to the myth of the thin blue line, which is that aforementioned idea that police are the only protection good law-abiding citizens have from a world of depraved criminals who want nothing but to harm them.
Joe Friday is the main character, and he is just perfect. Like, he never shoots his gun. When he does, it's one shot. He never misses. He's very clinical. He's very cold. He's very calm.
I took the money from people who had it and gave it to those who didn't. What do you think, Sergeant?
What's that?
Was I wrong?
He never gets emotional. He always gets the right guy. He's just perfect. You know, he's like the ideal of what you would want in a detective. Not realistic at all, obviously, and bought and paid for by the LAPD. Then there's also like a lot of thin blue line stuff going on. So they'll talk about how there's crime right around. There's crime every day. It's threatening our city, but good thing we have Mr. Joe Friday. These are real stories. We've changed the names to protect the innocent, but this is what's going on, guys.
Yeah, and
LAPD's got you.
Shows like Cops used to put that reality on in full display. Shows like Law and Order gave us.
Law and Order is one that's going to get a lot of you. Law and Order is the one that's going to get a lot of you. Gets me a little bit. You know, one of the ones for me, though, too, is that fucking Die Hard. I love that shit. I love that whole series. Even the bad ones. We watch them every holiday. But he's a fucking cop, too, right? I mean, his buddy, the big black guy, that cop, I love Die Hard, man. Doesn't mean I can't watch it and can't enjoy it, but it's kind of like I'm eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Especially the one I make. It's the size of a fucking meatball. I'll tell you that right now. But like, I'm eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Let's not kid myself. I know how much sugar is in that thing and how it's not really good for me. I can pretend all I want about all that protein in that peanut butter. But I'm not eating like peanut butter I made at home. That's some Skippy extra chunky, and I know as much as I put on and as much jelly as I put on, how much sugar I'm taking in. I just got to be honest about it.
Dramatic, heinous examples of the worst things that could happen, but justice is served by the end of the show. And shows like The Wire and We Own the Night present a critical eye toward policing that still eventually reinforces the thin blue line myth. And even outside of that frame, we have shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Reno 911 that make cops funny.
Tell me why
Ain't nothing but a heartache.
Tell me why
Ain't nothing.
And shows like Paw Patrol that hide the gross reality of what police dogs tend to do in real life and their historical connection to slavery.
It is a show that is very like pro police, obviously. Like the main character is a cop dog. His name is Chase. That's kind of crazy. Let's not leave that unsaid. They keep giving him like gadgets. Like he's got like a drone. He's got like spy gear. He's got all this other stuff. There's like mass surveillance. They know where everything is all the time. Research that I did for the Paw Patrol video, I've done a lot of research on cop stuff and police brutality. That is some of the most horrific shit I've ever read. There were like jugulars broken. People lost their testicles. Like just crazy golf-sized bites being taken out of people's legs for often like not a real, like just in the arrest. Like they're not convicted. There's nothing going on here. Like they might not even be guilty of anything.
Let's keep that in mind. This is happening in the arrest process. Innocent until proven guilty. This is happening in the arrest process. You haven't been charged and convicted of anything yet when this is going on. That's fucking bad, dude. That's bad. Like, don't get me, well, if you weren't doing something wrong, that wouldn't happen to you. Bad shit happens to good, innocent people every goddamn day. Just looking at the news feed that's coming through my phone while I'm making this video. Right now, the news updates. Right now, today, bad things are happening to good and innocent people every day.
Have nothing.
Jen's money back here. You're under arrest, okay?
All of these shows and movies promote an image of policing and crime that just isn't real and doesn't even make sense most of the time. However, with these images everywhere, with people engaging with the police through TV more than real life, the fiction becomes reality. And we think this is how policing works, and it definitely is not. As I said earlier, the police don't solve many crimes, and they don't have a legal obligation to protect people. And research has consistently found that more police and the amount of police have little to no effect on crime. There is research that indicates that focused deterrent strategies, aka putting more police in high crime neighborhoods, has some effect on reducing crime. But then we have to engage with the whole other body of research that shows the consequence of over-policing poor communities, aka rises in police brutality, the prison population, community disinvestment, you know, the whole problem of the 94 crime bill. I see multiple cop cars whenever I leave my house, and I don't feel any safer. Further, a fraction of the money being spent to over-police high crime areas could be better used to actually funnel resources into those areas with far greater social benefit at a cheaper price. But
it's kind of like all the people right now on both sides of the political spectrum that are waking up to the fact that our U.S. government is sending hundreds of billions of dollars to overseas as aid and military aid to two specific regions, the Ukraine and Israel, right? To support what is going on over there, the wars that are going on over there. The one place there's a war, the other is just a freaking genocide. And people on both sides of the political spectrum, in fact, the vast majority of Americans do not want that to happen. They would much rather have those resources spent, the resources spent, if we have money to send here in this country to solve the problems we have here. This is the same thing. This is the same thing. It is the militarization of police departments and the amount of money that each city spends on this stuff that drains and keeps us from having some of the other resources that we need as a society. Like Like, I mean, it's not that far of a stretch. I mean, look at that shit. Every major city has that. And now it's not just major cities, it's smaller communities. We have this going on in the wealthiest country in the history of this planet. And what do we spend our money on? There's a reason why the Copaganda continues to happen. It's so you don't bitch. They pump you full of the fear that we need this to be the case. Not enough people that look like me are bitching about it. And so they get to just keep funneling the money where they want it to go instead of where it needs to fucking go. It's not that complicated, guys. It's not that complicated.
Reality is these systems aren't meant to benefit society, they're meant to control it. And the thing is, this is not some like left-wing nonsense. This is not some, critical theory extrapolation. This is well understood, constantly reproduced research. The Department of Justice just released a report on the Minneapolis Police Department where George Floyd and many other innocent unarmed people have been murdered. And it showed a clear pattern of repeated abuses and violations that they've known about for decades. But that's not unique. Pretty much anywhere where the DOJ or anyone has investigated the police, they found the exact same things: rampant abuses of power, ingrained racism, and a lack of accountability. And again, this isn't something we're subtly aware of. 60 plus years of sociological and criminological research on crime has told us over and over that the greatest predictor of crime is poverty and community dysfunction. And thus, the best way to reduce crime is to increase the quality of life in high crime areas.
Law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights.
This is the year I was born. This is the world I was born into. This time, 1967, the Detroit riots, civil unrest, Vietnam War ramping up. This is when I was born. And this is all I've ever known. So this stuff has been force-fed to me from the time I was on my mama's teat. Okay? And I know most of you watching, it's the same. But like this right now, what you're about to see, what was as on the news and happening in our country the year I was born.
John. Hello, Mr. President. How are you? Fine, thank you, sir. John, you know what I think of you, don't you? I certainly do, Mr. President, vice versa. I've got to ask you now to act like the good American I believe you to be. I'm going to seriously consider appointing a small group of 7 or 9 tonight to look into the cause of these disorders. I want nothing but competence, and I want nothing but compassion, and I want nothing but patriotism. The commission will investigate the origins of the disorders in our cities. It will make recommendations to me, to the Congress, to the state governors, to the mayors for measures to prevent or contain such disasters.
The President's Advisory Commission on Civil Disorder warned that race hatred threatened to tear this country apart.
What white Americans have never fully understood, but what can never forget, is that white society is deeply impacted in the ghetto. White institutions created it. White institutions maintain it. And white society condones it.
This is important. Again, I know I keep saying all these things are important, but it's incredibly important. And before you come at me with your politics and your Republican or Democrat, remember, okay, I'm a leftist, and it's Democrats. Clinton, Democrat. Lyndon B. Johnson, Democrat. A lot of these things happened under Democratic fucking regimes. Democratic cities, liberal cities, okay? So it's not a red and blue. It's everywhere. It's ingrained in our economy. This is about poverty. This is about racism. This is about capitalism. This is about propaganda. And it's about funneling money away from the places and the people that needed it and putting it into the pockets of rich people over and over and over again, because money is power, and people that have power ain't fucking giving it up anytime soon.
One of the things that they dispense with, early on, is the idea that you just need to reform police. And they said, like, look, no, this is about housing, this is about education, this is about healthcare, this is about media, this is about employment and unemployment, all of the institutions that really relate to life outcomes. And when they kind of walk through the data of the systemic differentiation between how those institutions interacted with Black people and how they interacted with white people, or how they interacted with non-white people, they just came to this holistic understanding, of the problem. And they were saying, well, you can't really talk about policing without also talking about unemployment. And you can't talk about unemployment without talking about education. You can't talk about education without talking about housing.
Among the ingredients of this mixture are pervasive discrimination and segregation in employment, education, housing, to have resulted in the continuing exclusion of great number from the benefit of economic progress. Black in-migration and white exodus, which have produced the massive and growing concentrations of impoverished in our major cities, creating a growing crisis of deteriorating facilities and services and unmet human needs.
It's the same things we've been saying forever. They found it way back in 1968. The findings were so scathing to the lack of real effort by the government to heal the wounds of racism that the report had to leak out of the relatively progressive Lyndon B. Johnson administration. They didn't want the truth to come out about their own findings.
See, he's saying it right there. What I said earlier. It had the relatively progressive administration of Lyndon B. Johnson, and the report had to be leaked out. See, the dishonesty, it's constant.
The Kerner Commission report is not new science. You can go to any ghetto in the world, in the entire world, South America, South Africa, South Asia, Eastern Europe. You'll find people in dire straits ripping each other apart for the sake of survival. And in every situation, the same solutions are prescribed: social support, community investment, healthcare, education. Yet, whether it's Joe Biden in 1994 or Joe Biden in 2020, you still see our government officials peddling the lie that we need a better trained and better funded police force to address crime, and somehow the failures of policing.
I know most cops and their families are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. We have to do better. Give law enforcement the real training they need. Hold them to higher standards. Help them succeed in keeping us safe.
The fallacy of the existence of modern policing is well documented. There will be some books in the description, but just in the last month or so since this video was in production, other big YouTubers like Big Joel, Some More News, Philosophy Tube have made videos detailing lots of new evidence as to why policing is bad. And Skip Intro has a whole series on Copaganda that is well worth your time. I appreciate them because the reality is that Black people have been telling this same fucking story to the whole country for several generations now, and it's fallen on deaf ears. It's been in our music.
That's my fault too, right? They've been telling this story. They've been telling this story for years, and it's fallen on deaf ears, and my ears used to be deaf. And they're not so much anymore. They're not so much anymore. And I apologize, like I said before. I apologize I'm late to the party, but I finally got here, and I'm glad I am, and I hope you guys have me. So, anyways, I could go on and on forever, but we've been almost an hour and a half today, and I got some other shit I want to do. So, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Thank you for FD Signifier for putting out such wonderful content that is informative and put in an instructional manner for someone like me that's a little thick-headed and comes to it slowly. But At least, I'm getting there. Anyways, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. I love you, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Namaste.